how to keep love alive. This is a little bit different than how to make a Ukrainian decorated egg. How many of you came to the Ukrainian decorated eggs? A few of you did. Was that fun? Yeah. So we're not going to learn how to make something, but we're going to learn today something even more important, and that is how to keep our relationships healthy, how to keep them alive and strong over the years. Because I believe that almost everybody wants a good relationship. We all want a good relationship. But there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way. And sometimes we don't quite know how to get it back on track when it's gotten off track. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is some information from a number of different researchers and a number of different studies that really tells us a lot about what is it that makes up a healthy, strong relationship, a satisfying relationship, a relationship that lasts over years. And I'm going to be sharing, for that piece, I'm going to be sharing the work of Dr. John Gottman from the Gottman Institute. He's been studying, I think it's about 400 or 500 couples over 40 years. And he's also studied many other couples as well, but he has this longitudinal study, so he really has a good sense of what changes over the life of a relationship and what are those very specific types of behaviors and types of actions that really make a difference. So we'll be sharing that with you, and also be sharing some information from a survey that was done through Cornell, my husband's alma mater, Cornell University, where they looked at or talked to and surveyed almost 400 elder in quotes. As I get older, elder kind of has a different meaning, but over 65-year-olds, to find out what is their advice. Having gone through a long life, and many of them married for decades and decades, what is their advice? What have they learned over the years? So I'll be sharing that information with you as well. So you should have a handout that looks like this. If you didn't get one, there are some on the back table there. So this is what's called the Sound Relationship House. This was developed by Dr. John Gottman, as I was mentioning him before, from the Gottman Institute in Seattle. And in his studies, what he learned is that there are 7 very specific elements, factors that make up a strong, healthy, satisfying relationship. And we're going to look at what each one of those are and how they play out in your own relationships. And also what he found is that those 2 pillars on the outside, trust and commitment, are 2 things that are like the foundation, I think, for any relationship, that hold all that together. So we're going to look at that in a moment, but first, I want to talk a little bit about the stages of relationships. So relationships go through different stages, and it's really helpful to understand what those are, because sometimes we expect things to be just like they were in the beginning, when it was all roses and flowers and, you know, fun and smiles. And everything seemed perfect, and we thought it was going to be that way forever. But challenges come along, and so we go through different stages. So the first stage in a relationship, anybody recognize these people? Yeah. So there's Harry and Meghan, right? We all love their pictures, right? So cute. So this is kind of, we're in love, right? We're in love. Everything's going to be happy forever, never, 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 right? This first stage is called limerence. And limerence just means that state where you're in love. You're initially in love. And one of the things that characterizes this stage is that there are a number of chemicals. So we don't think about chemicals when we're talking about love, do we? But there are actually a number of chemicals that are released in our bodies when we're in this early stage, when everything seems perfect and rosy and wonderful, right? And those chemicals help to keep this, in the initial stage, to keep that spark there. And there are 2 primary ones. You may have heard of them. One is dopamine. So dopamine you may have heard of. It's what's called the pleasure chemical. It's the same chemical that gets released when we take drugs, like cocaine and things like that, which we shouldn't be doing. But it's that same chemical because it creates a heightened sense of pleasure. It's a pleasure center of our brain. That part of our brain is very activated. Those chemicals are released. And the other one that's a real important chemical at the beginning of relationships is something called oxytocin. Some of you may have heard of that. It's sometimes called the cuddle chemical. It's a chemical that helps us connect with people, right? So in fact, what we found is that if you take a spray, you can get a spray now, I think you can probably get them on the internet, and you spray some oxytocin, about 4 sprays in each nostril, you will start feeling very friendly and very fond of the person you're with, right? You're going to bond with that person. It's called the cuddle chemical. Again, it's released when women give birth, for example. It's released during breastfeeding. Helps us connect. Those are important chemicals to keep us connected and bonded during those early stages when we're first getting to know each other. However, over time, those chemicals subside. They're not released at the same levels. And what happens often is if our expectation is that we're going to be like this forever, and that if it's not like this, if we're not in limerence, madly in love, then something's wrong, right? So that's where you see some people who have a series of many falling in love, and then it falls apart, and then falling in love with someone else and falling in love, because they keep looking for that same kind of high, that natural high that comes at that stage. But maturity tells us that it can't stay like that forever. Because, as I said, life intervenes, stress intervenes, conflict intervenes. So we go to the second level, second stage in the relationship, which is really about building trust. So this is the stage where you kind of go, oh, wait a minute. Is that really the way you are? Wait a second. That little quirk that I thought was so absolutely charming and enticing is kind of annoying now. So this is the stage of trust where we begin to question, are you there for me? I think that's the primary question at this point. Are you there for me? Are you going to be there for me when I need you? Will you have my back when I'm dealing with difficult things in my life, right? It has to do with our ability to manage conflict, because this is the stage where conflict starts to happen. We start to realize we have different preferences, different needs, different ways of communicating, and so conflict gets heightened. And it's our ability to learn how to effectively navigate that conflict and be there for each other that helps us get through that stage. Many relationships, and many that I see in my practice, I work with couples who are in trouble. Many of them are stuck in this stage because they never learned how to effectively manage conflict, so they never get out of it. They may stay together, and maybe you know people like this, but they keep recycling. Have you ever seen that? Kind of the same argument over and over and over and never gets anywhere. They just get gridlocked because they don't know how to get out of it. There are ways to get out of it, but we don't all know that, right? So for those relationships that do get through that trust, are you there for me? Can I depend on you? Can I rely on you? Are you responsible? Are you consistent? Do you have my back? Those relationships can get to level 3 or stage 3, and that's the stage of commitment. And commitment is really the stage of long-term love. So it feels different than that early limerence stage, right? It feels different. It's more mellow, usually. There's more contentment there. There aren't such highs and lows. It's kind of a little bit more, you know, there's some highs and lows. Every relationship has that. But it's a little more evened out. It's a little bit more mellow. And what characterizes that third stage of commitment is the ability to really cherish what you have in your partner, to accept them for who they are, to appreciate them for who they are and get that back, and to really cherish what you have, to stop thinking of, you know, things could be better, I could find somebody better, you know, this isn't working, but to really focus and cherish what you have and appreciate what you have. And that is what characterizes the third stage, the commitment stage. So let's get back to this sound relationship house, understanding the background of those 3 stages. And this helps us understand how we get from limerence through conflict and building trust to the stage of commitment. I'm going to start at the bottom, friendship into intimacy. So the first 4 at the bottom, building love maps, sharing fondness and admiration, turning toward instead of away, and taking the positive perspective. Those all have to do with building friendship and building intimacy and closeness. So building love maps is about knowing each other, knowing each other's world, knowing what's important to your partner, asking about what's important to them, trying to learn. No matter how long we know somebody, there's still things we can learn, right? We can still learn about them, and that curiosity. That's a real foundational part of friendship and intimacy. Sharing fondness and admiration. Having the kind of filter where you're looking for the positives. You're looking for what you can appreciate. You're looking for what your partner does, rather than looking for what's wrong. And what we find is that for relationships that are pretty healthy and strong, that when you look at how they interact, there are about 20 positive interactions. In other words, gratitude, compliments, appreciations, admirations. There's about 20 of those to every single negative one. That's a huge difference, isn't it? 20 to 1. 20 to 1. Those couples who are really healthy and strong, long-lasting, have a lot more positive interactions. Turning towards instead of away. And that has to do with being able to look to your partner for support. Is your partner the person in your life who you go to when you have a difficulty, when you have stress in your life, when you have a challenge, when you have somebody that you're dealing with that you're having some challenges with? It's the ability to be able to turn toward each other and also to get that comfort and that support from each other. I'm always surprised when I work with couples how many people turn outside the relationship for support and help. I was seeing a couple just the other day, and she was dealing with a very difficult situation. It was actually a situation that affected both of them. It had to do with some infertility issues. And very upsetting time for her. And she was going to her mother and to her sister for help and support. And her husband was feeling really left out of the loop. He was, something that affected, obviously, both of them very much so. So one of the things we worked on is helping her go to him, helping her turn to him, and helping him learn how to be there and to be a soft place for her to land, right? Because that's the other side of it. If I turn to you, are you going to be a soft place for me to land? The positive perspective, that part of a relationship, it has to do with being able to give each other the benefit of the doubt, right? So if I come home and I'm kind of grumpy because I had just a difficult time in my day, or just I'm really tired, is my partner able to not take that personally, for example? Are they able to give me the benefit of the doubt? Are they able to assume the positive? That, maybe I just had a bad day and that's okay. And so the more we assume the positive, the more we give each other the benefit of the doubt, what happens is the more of a culture of appreciation is built in the relationship, right? Because sometimes what happens, if I assume the negative and I act that way, if my husband comes home grumpy and I think, he's being difficult and I'm annoyed that he's grumpy, and I react to the grumpiness and I say something like, well, what's wrong with you? What's your problem? And then he reacts to that, my comment, right? And he reacts negatively to that. And then guess what happens? We're off and running, aren't we? So something really simple can start a negative cycle. Taking the positive perspective also has to do with recognizing when you're beginning to go down a negative cycle. We've all had those discussions, conversations with our partners or with friends or family members, and this is not going well. How many of you have had those? I think we all have. This is not going well, right? This is not, but we keep going in that direction. So being able to take the positive is also being able to bring things back on track, to reach out in a positive way, to say, you know what, I'm sorry, that didn't come out right. Can I, let me rephrase that. Or being able to be understanding goes a long way in keeping a relationship healthy. The central part, managing conflict, huge. right? We talked about that as one of the primary tasks in the second stage of a relationship. Because managing conflict, it can become the focus of your relationship, conflict, or it can become just a minor thing that sometimes there's a little hiccup or bump in the road and you get over it, right? So the stronger those first 4 steps are, the stronger you have a sense of knowing each other's world and feeling known, the stronger you have fondness and admiration, you're expressing in a frequent way your appreciation, your admiration of each other, the more you turn toward each other in times of difficulty or stress, and the more you're a soft place to land when your partner turns toward you. The more you assume the positive, the more those 4 things are happening in a really strong way, guess what? Conflict becomes pretty easy to manage. It becomes pretty easy to manage. If you don't have a good foundation of fondness and intimacy, of appreciation, a culture of appreciation, then when conflict comes along, it blows up much more easily. And you get caught in that gridlock where you go round and round, same issue, round and round, over and over and over and over and over. Same argument, we never get anywhere, right? So managing conflict involves a lot of very specific behaviors. At the most basic level, I think what it has to do is learning how to communicate when you have a complaint or a concern or an annoyance. We all have them, right, at times. Being able to communicate that in a way that your partner can hear it. That is huge. Because what we tend to do, if we don't know better, is we tend, when we have a concern, when we have something we're unhappy about, we tend to communicate it in a blaming way. You know, you never come home on time. What happens when we say something like that, when we say it with that you statement with a little bit of blame, what happens? What happens when somebody talks to you that way? I think all of us, our natural tendency is to feel defensive. We feel attacked, right? We feel defensive. And what do you do when you feel defensive? You want to get back, absolutely. You want to get, oh, well, wait a minute. You know, I was on time at least once 10 years ago. I remember it very specifically. Or we might say something like, you know, don't talk to me that way. You're the one who's always late. Yeah? So we want to get back. We want to even the score, kind of. And of course, that kind of interaction, that sort of tit for tat, is going to escalate into an argument. And for some couples, that can escalate in really nasty ways. For some couples, it can escalate into ways that they just separate, they just stay away from each other. I was working with a couple the other day, and they said they hadn't spoken in 2 weeks. They had a fight, they hadn't spoken in 2 weeks. I said, do you eat, you know, how about pass the butter? And they say, well, sometimes pass the butter, we can do that, but that's about it. I'm not communicating about anything else. They were still so mad, they were still so stuck in that. And part of why they stayed stuck there is they didn't know how to get out. So a big, big part of effectively managing conflict, in addition to being able to start a conversation or introduce an annoyance or a concern or complaint in a soft way, in a way your partner can hear without being defensive. Another big piece of effectively managing conflict is what we call repair. And that means noticing when things are off track, noticing when you're going on that negative path, when you're starting in that maybe criticism, defensive cycle, when you're not listening, when your partner speaks, instead of really trying to understand and hear what they're saying, you're doing what we do a lot of times, and that's rehearse what we're going to say, right? Rehearse our rebuttal and try to, you know, look for a pause and get that in. So repair is the ability, super, super important in managing conflict well. It's the ability to recognize when the discussion is going in a negative way and bring it back into a positive. Bring it back on track in a positive way, right? The ability to do that is one of the primary things that creates a healthy, strong, long-lasting relationship, the ability to repair, right? So how do you do that? Well, first of all, it takes 2 people to repair. So it takes one person to reach out to make an effort to repair. It takes the other person to receive it. So for example, some people, I had somebody just the other day, they had a conflict and he made an attempt to repair it. But what he did was he made a joke at her expense. Right, okay. You know, that doesn't go well, right? That doesn't go well. He thought he was being funny. When he talked about it, I believe he genuinely, his intention was to sort of lighten things up. But the joke he made was at her expense, right? Well, guess what? Do you think she laughed? No, she didn't laugh. She was very annoyed, and she was very upset and got very angry. And he's kind of going, I was just trying to be funny. I was just trying to lighten it up. So you have to know what to do and what works with your partner, right? So for example, for some people, touch works. Reaching out and holding your partner's hand, giving them a hug, sitting closer to them. Sometimes that can be helpful in getting things back on track. Sometimes it doesn't even take words when you do that. You can do it non-verbally without words. Sometimes an apology, of course, a sincere apology. So a sincere apology does not sound like, okay, I'm sorry. All right? Have you ever heard that kind of, okay, I'm sorry, all right, let's get over it. That's not an apology. That's not a sincere apology. That's what I call, let's, shut up and let's move on. It's very different. So a sincere apology is taking responsibility for your own part. I'm really sorry I said that. That was below the belt. I apologize. I take that back. All right? And the other side of it, as I said, is for the other person, their partner, to be able to accept that, to be able to say, thanks for saying that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you recognize you did that. All right? If instead the partner says something like, you don't really mean that. You don't really mean that. You're just saying that. That was not an effective repair. We're still off on a negative track. We're not back on a positive track. So that ability to repair. Is it okay? My husband's sitting here in the back. Is it okay if I tell a personal story about us? Yeah, no, that's okay. So he's feeling a little, he doesn't know what the story is, okay. It's okay. It's a long ago story. You may not even remember. A long ago story having to do repair. So in our living room, we have two love seats. At that time we did. We had two love seats facing each other, right? And with a big coffee table in the front. So he was on one love seat and I was on the other. And we were in what I would say an intense conversation. Let's just say it was intense, right? We both were getting a little heated. I'm not exactly sure what the topic was, to tell you the truth right now, but I can remember the intensity. And my husband was saying something. He was wanting to get his point across. And of course, I wanted to get my point across. And I'm listening to him, and I'm starting to kind of boil a little bit inside. And I realized, and then this part of me clicked in. I mean, even though I know this stuff, I have to remind myself too sometimes. This part of me clicked in and said, this is silly. This is pointless. And one of the things I know about my husband is that one of the ways to really connect with him pretty easily and quickly is through touch. That is very important to him. So what I did was I stood up from my couch, love seat. I went over and I sat next to him. I just sat next to him. I didn't say a word. I just sat there. He's sitting here. I'm sitting here. And he kept talking. Do you remember this? No, he doesn't. He kept talking, but he kind of slowed down. And he looked at me, and I just sat there. And he kept talking. So then I took my legs, and I shifted over, and I put my legs on top of his lap, on his lap. I didn't say a word. He kept talking, and then it was like he could not keep talking the way he was talking with me sitting that way. It was actually impossible, I think, for him to do that. And what happened was we didn't solve the problem in that moment, but what happened is we both calmed down. Because until you can calm down, you cannot solve the problem. So the first step in solving the problem is to calm down. And knowing ways to help your partner calm down and knowing ways to calm yourself down can absolutely transform the types of conflicts and how they play out in your relationships. The third part of the Sound Relationship House is called Sharing and Supporting Life Dreams. And that includes two pieces. That first one, starting at the bottom there, is called Making Life Dreams Come True. And the second one is called Creating Shared Meaning. So making life dreams come true, one of the things we find with highly successful couples is they support what's important to the other person. They support their partner's passions and dreams and goals. They support them. They say, I'm there for you. I don't know how we're going to make it work. You know, there'll be some sacrifices, but I know how important this is to you, and I'll be there for you with this. They support each other, what's most important to each other. That's huge. That's huge. Even if you don't know how that's going to work, and if it seems impossible, just being able to say, you know what, honey, I don't know how we're going to figure that out, but I'm here and I'm your partner, and we'll figure it out together, because I know how important that is to you. Feeling that you've got that kind of support from your partner is hugely important in that strong connection. And the last one, creating shared meaning, that has to do with the meaning, the kind of life purpose, the legacy that you create together. What are the things that you share together that are important, that give meaning to your life? I know, for example, my husband and I, there are many things we share, but one of the things we both really share is education, and we're always listening to great courses, books on tape, and then we talk about them. And whenever we travel, we're traveling to Alaska in September, and we're already starting to read books about the history of Alaska and learn about Alaska. When we went to Italy, we took lessons in Italian so we could speak Italian. So we share that love for learning, and that's been an important part of our relationship. So just as an example. So what is the secret to keeping love alive? We looked at the stages of love, the 3 stages. We looked at the 7 essential parts of strong, healthy, satisfying, long-lasting relationships. We talked about the importance of trust and commitment to hold all of that together. So part of the secret is knowing what are the elements of a strong, healthy relationship. What are the specific kinds of actions that couples in strong relationships take? How do they treat each other compared to those who are not in such good relationships? So one of the other studies that I wanted to share with you in regard to this question, what is the secret? Because we've learned about the background, but how do you put this all into practice? And this comes from a study that was done through Cornell University. It's been written up in this book called 30 Lessons for Loving. It's a great book. And they studied about 400 people, elderly people over the age of 65. And what they did, they had a series of questions, but they basically were asking them, what have you learned about love and about marriage during your time on this earth? What have you learned? What kind of advice do you want to pass on to the younger generation? And I want to read a couple of examples. So the first one comes from Antoinette, age 81. She's been married for 55 years. And she said that at the very beginning, the first several years of their relationship were very, very difficult. They had a lot of conflict. It was very rough. But that gradually, with a lot of hard work, with a lot of talking, with a lot of learning about how to communicate better, especially when they're upset with each other, and especially by taking time every day to turn toward each other and focus on each other, to give each other their attention. That's probably the biggest gift we have to give, is our attention. I see you. I see you. You're important to me. They worked very hard on that. They've been married now 55 years. And she said they now have what they both describe as a really warm and loving relationship. Took them a while to get there. Takes commitment to do that. Daniel, age 76, said that the key to happiness is being loving and caring and doing things for your spouse. And I like this. Sorry to the guys in the room. But Daniel, age 76, also said This is especially true for men. They need to learn this lesson. They need to learn, they need to develop, we all do, a habit of doing small positive things. Because it's those small things, those small, frequent, everyday positive things, turning toward, giving your attention, sharing admiration, sharing appreciations, that over time builds up and really makes the difference. And overall, when they looked at all the surveys from these older, I start to say elderly, but I'm older than 65, so I don't like the word elderly. Older people, 3 things kept coming through in their surveys that were important. And so overall, the advice from these participants for keeping a relationship warm, supportive, and fun. Don't we all want that? Warm, supportive, and fun. Wouldn't that be great? It's to make it a habit to do small, positive things. And specifically, some of the things that these older people recommended were, 1, surprises. Surprises are always nice, right? So I had a birthday, what was it, 3 weeks ago? And then we had Mother's Day right a week after my birthday. And my lovely husband gave me roses for both of those. Really special, really nice. And then last night, I was sitting in the living room reading, and I look up, and here's a brand new bouquet of roses on the table for no reason. And I said, oh my gosh, you know, how sweet. So it was totally unexpected. Totally, always nice to get roses for your birthday, but it's nice to get something unexpected, right? So that was an example. So surprises. Chores, doing the other person's chores, not just doing your own, but doing the other person's chores. I have so many couples who engage in what I call chore wars. It's like, who did more? And who didn't do their chore well enough? And who left a mess? And I have to clean up after your mess. But just doing it for the other person without being asked, wow, you get a lot of points for that. And then the third one was frequent compliments and thank yous. We've been talking about that already. Admiration, appreciation, gratitude, hugely, hugely important. Here are some specifics to kind of pull this all together. Keep love alive by doing small things often. Small things often gradually build a foundation and a culture of appreciation and warmth. Small things often. So one is to be conscious of partings and reunions. That's when you leave. You know, you leave on a trip, or you just leave in the morning, you part in the morning, and when you come back together at the end of the day, or when somebody returns from a trip, being conscious of that. Because leaving in a nice way, leaving with a have a good day, or hope you have a great tennis game, or, you know, see you later, hope that presentation you're giving goes well, just one sentence like that is a way of telling your partner, I'm thinking about your day, I'm thinking about you. And it sets the tone. And it makes it easier when you come back together, if you've left in a positive way. It makes it easier to come back together. Remember something your partner had going on that day and ask about them. All right? You know, how was that surgery you were talking about last night? How did that go? All right? How was that meeting at work? I know you had a meeting with your boss and you were a little concerned about it. How was it? Following up on that. Being more intentional. Turning the TV off. Coming out of, you know, if you're upstairs watching TV or something, coming out and coming down to greet your partner. Expressing, I've said this many times, I don't think you can do this enough. Expressing admiration, appreciation, and gratitude. Sometimes people will say to me, well, I don't have anything to appreciate. He does everything wrong. I had somebody say that the other way. He's always doing this. He's always doing that. He's never doing it. I said, wait a minute. We've got to change that filter. Start looking, and then notice, observe, and acknowledge. Show affection, reaching out, touching. One of the things we found, and there's actually some research now about this, is what happens when you hold hands. And one thing I was reading recently is they did a study of people who are going through an MRI, and they studied what happened to their brains. They were doing a functional MRI when they were holding their partner's hand and when they just went in by themselves, and also when they were holding the hand of the technician. I don't know, that would feel a little weird to me, but whatever. So 3 different scenarios. And what they found was huge difference in the experience of pain and in the level of calmness, right? So their physiology was calmer, and they recorded that they had less pain, those people who were holding their partner's hand when they went in. Those people who were holding the hand of the technician, it also was better than when they were alone, right? The one exception was couples who were at a high degree of conflict at that very time when they went in, and they actually were the worst group. High degree of conflict. It was really hard for them to calm down. But other than that, so holding hands calms us down and calms down the fear cycle and also the pain cycle, so real important. Make a ritual of spending time together. We hear sometimes about date night, that's important. What's also important is just a regular time, especially if you have kids, if you have busy lives, it's really important to make that a ritual. So I have a couple examples. I have one couple I've been working with, and what they do is every evening after dinner, they go out, they put the kids to bed, and they go out on their patio, and they bring a cup of tea, and they sit on the patio. And they spend 20, 30 minutes, and it's just a time to check in. How's your day? How are you doing? What's up? But they know that they have that regular time, that ritual of connecting. Especially when you have kids. It's easy for everything to get focused on family stuff and kid stuff. Give and receive bids for attention. Reach out to your partner. Reach out, let them know you're thinking about them. Hold their hand. Those are bids for attention. Say, you know what, I saw something, an article today, I thought you'd be interested in it. That kind of thing. Just what you're saying basically is, I'm thinking about you. You're important to me. Turning towards each other, I talked about that before. The importance of turning towards each other rather than outside and away during times of stress. And if you're on the receiving end of that, making sure that you're a receptive, welcoming place to land. And that doesn't, usually that does not mean giving advice about what your partner should do or shouldn't do. It just means listening. It just means listening and being there. Using a softened startup. Talked about that a little bit before. So a softened startup is when you're upset about something, you use an I statement instead of a you did this, you forgot that, you're never home on time. An I statement is this is what's happening for me, this is how I feel, this is what I need. Especially helpful if you start it with an endearment, if you have an endearment that you call your partner. So my husband is a master at this. He'll come to me sometimes and he'll say, sweetie pie, I need to talk to you about something. Okay, so I know that he's got something on his mind, right? So, it's easy for me to initially go, and I want to defend against it. But no, the important thing is when I hear, sweetie pie, there's something I need to talk to you about, I take a couple deep breaths. I say, okay, get ready to listen, right? Get ready to listen. But it's a lot easier to hear when he puts it that way. Instead of, you forgot to turn off the dishwasher or whatever. Aim for the magic ratio of 20 positive interactions to every negative one. Again, that balance. Healthy, strong, long-lasting relationships, when you see them, just a normal interactions, they have about 20 positive interactions to every negative one. So in a nutshell, the secret is do small things, positive things, often. Keep doing them even though. In other words, even though you're not getting them back to the extent you think you should, or even though your partner's not recognize them, keep doing them. And by doing so, you will gradually add to your relationship's emotional bank account. The more you've got in your emotional bank account, the more when things are tough, when there are misunderstandings, miscommunications, stress, the easier it is to get through those if you have a good, solid emotional bank account. So thank you again. So appreciate your being here and appreciate your attendance, and you're very welcome.